Cake's Fashion Nugget released September. Good start. Good start. All right, let's try that again. Cake's Fashion Nugget was released September 17th, 1996, produced by the band themselves. This album went platinum the year after it was released. It's the band's second full-length album, following up 1994's Motorcade of Generosity. I'm Seth Sparks. Welcome to the show. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Best, up in God's country in South Central Kentucky. Josh, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you, Seth?
I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about this album that I know that we've both liked for almost 30 years at this point. If I were going to sum up this album in a really fancy way, I would say that this is like a guided tour through an insanely diverse range of musical genres, all given their like respect and just due by Cake. It's hard to think of an album that explores as much like stylistic territory while still sounding only like this one band. It's very distinct. So I don't know, man. This album's like a warm blanket for me. I've played it on repeat for years. Even today, I can listen to it from start to finish and enjoy every second of it. But tell me about you. What do you remember about first being exposed to Fashion Nugget?
The Distance was extremely popular on the radio, MTV. So I would guess one of my friends got that album, and you know, I would be at their house and would hear it. But I think it was one of the first CDs I ever bought. You said it's like a warm blanket. It's like that. My sentiments exactly. There's from the very first listen, it hit a note with me, and it became one of my favorite albums immediately. So yeah, I'm so glad we're talking about Fashion Nugget today, because it's something that I can definitely spend some time chatting about.
Yeah, same here. And it's funny. So I'm going to make a little bit of a confession before we get started, which is like, as much as I love this album today, and even like when it was released, I didn't actually start off that way. At very first listen, John McCrae's voice threw me a little bit, man. It was foreign to me, and it's funny. I think that sometimes when you're not used to something, you interpret it as something to like kind of recoil from and say that you don't like it. So I think I first interpreted his voice as something that I didn't like. And I think that held true all for a week. And at first I decided I had to kind of put up with that sort of style of singing, that flatter sort of style, because the arrangements and songs and musicianship, everything was so melodic and infectious that I could tolerate the vocals. And before I knew it, like I came to love McCrae's voice. It's like maybe the most defining characteristic of Cake's sound, and no band sounds like Cake. Whether Cake's playing R&B or funk or Latin music, they sound like Cake. One of the things I thought would be good to start this conversation off is just talking about genres in general, and it's rare to find artists who really explore different genres. Certainly true of musical artists like in the 90s. For decades, musical genres, I think it's still this way, and I think it was true like probably back in the 60s, 50s, maybe even before, that there like a genre is associated with like almost a lifestyle, not to make a pun of the rock and roll lifestyle, the Cake song on Motorcade, but I don't know, it's like part of your identity. I think basically having like a clear style and playing within that genre gives you an identity. It gives you like a tribe of people who are going to listen to that same type of music. If you think about like the person in middle school who you found out liked, Nevermind or whatever, whatever you were listening to in middle school, it was like you were immediately in a tribe together. So like for any artist who's willing to experiment with these genres and they're not conforming with the rules of alt rock or whatever it might be, I think there's a risk there. You're risking like alienating entire tribes of listeners. Like in the 90s, those lines were pretty clearly drawn. Like if you were a grunge fan or a hip hop fan, you weren't trying to hear like from George Strait, you know? It's like, and not that people didn't listen to like multiple musical genres at a time, because I mean certainly people do, but there's almost like a certain set of ideas or ways of thinking that are tied to the music that you're listening to. So, from a business perspective, it's risky to introduce a country song or cover one of disco's like biggest hits, and I Will Survive on an alternative rock album. So, I don't know. Maybe it's a little dramatic to call bands who experiment with many genres brave, but I do think it's commendable at the very least. And when you do it well, like Cake does, or like Beck will do, or we've talked about Blur and how they'll do it, or Ween will definitely dabble in those. You know, there aren't a ton of them, but I think it's usually because they genuinely love the types of music that they're doing, and they're willing to risk some of that commercial success for the sake of doing what most interests them. And this made me think of you in a certain extent, because I know that you're not a country guy, you know, like you're not out
No.
there listening to country top 40. I know you weren't doing it back in the 90s, and I'm pretty sure that's still true today.
Yes. No, I am definitely not a country guy. That's the one genre that you cannot convince me. You couldn't sit me down and give me your best songs and convince me this is what I need to be listening to. Actually, if you were to sit me down and say this is what we're going to do, we're not
You're not
interested.
sitting.
So, yeah, don't let my accent fool you. I am not into country. Yeah. But yeah,
Well, it's
golly.
interesting though, because this album, I mean, for somebody like you, and let's think about 1996 and what you're listening to, and you were a fan of Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and you were like deeply steeped in that stuff. When you were listening to Fashion Nugget, you talked about how it grabbed it immediately. It's interesting to me that they could weave that in. I mean, when you look at like the flavors of their music, especially true for Motorcade, but I think you hear it a lot in Fashion Nugget too, is that country influence.
Yes.
How did that strike you? Did it put you off? Did it, or did they execute it in such a way that it didn't bother you?
No, that the execution was, top notch. Not only did it not bother you, but it was amazing. Like you liked it.
Yeah,
I like the country flavor because when you say country, the first thing I think of is like, I guess, like what's country now and maybe what was country when we were 15 years old. And pop country may not be good, in our opinion, but that classic country, I do. I kind of have always had an affinity for. I just dabbled. I never was like a big fan, but if you heard something good, it didn't really matter if it was country or what it was. Good, good music's good music. So, like stick shifts and safety belts and what's it called? She'll come back to me.
yeah.
Those, I mean, those are just done in such a classical style that not only was it, was able to tolerate it, but it was actually phenomenal.
Yeah, it's appealing, and I think they do a good job of picking some of the best things. You're a big harmony guy. You love to listen to harmonies, and country can have like, especially that old school stuff, can have really great harmonies. They do that in such a flawless way too. And I think that another important thing to note about Fashion Nugget is, I mean, I just talked at length about genres, but this isn't an album that's just full of like homages and interpretations of different genres of music. I think there are songs on this album that I don't know if I could categorize them in any other genre other than like, this is what Cake sounds like. When I think of songs like Open Book or Frank Sinatra, It's Coming Down, like I don't know what genre that belongs to. I have no idea how you
Right.
would classify that. I mean, how would you describe Cake's sound to someone?
You said it earlier. They have an iconic sound where if I were to walk into a room and heard a Cake song playing that I didn't know, I'd never heard before, I would immediately know it's a Cake song. So
Yeah.
even though they're doing country flavor and they're doing whatever the heck you call Frank Sinatra and Open Book and Daria, they still have this great sound. How to describe it? It's like I don't know how you describe it. I would describe it as well written, just Americana rock. They're going to use instruments that are unpredictable. You never know what's gonna take the lead or the forefront, so they might use like a synthesizer or a trumpet, definitely guitars. They're gonna use pianos. So that's how I would describe the sound. You're gonna get a great, well-written song, and the flavor is gonna be kind of fun and unpredictable.
I'll read you what McRae says about their sound. I'm with you. I think it's a very difficult sound to describe. It's just uniquely them. It's so unique that it kind of defies explanation unless you've heard it. John McRae, here's a quote that he gave in an interview, which is he said, "I think I wanted to create a sort of anti-tribe or a sense of the anti-genre, and I still feel like tribal assertion is smart guy. Still feel like tribal assertion is an encumbrance of musical communication. In other words, people feel like they have to sort of adhere to musical norms. And by definition, they're compromising musical expression. There's stuff to be found without necessarily embracing the entirety of a culture. You can find musical tools and devices from mariachi music or New Orleans jazz or hair metal from the early 80s. I think there's stuff to be found anywhere you look. Like there's great melodies in opera. What Cake does well is we're good scavengers. What you get with this album, with Fashion Nugget and with the band in general, I think is just exactly like you said it really well. You get clever, deliberate songwriting, melodies that you can't get out of your head. You get creative interpretations of classic songs. You get incredible musicianship, great harmonies. I mean, and this album really encapsulates everything I think that you could hope for from like a classic American songbook. It's just like you said, like this is just the melting pot, sort of all blended together in a way that I think it really hits in a unique way. But the Cake's lineup changed a lot throughout the years. I think there's a special alchemy with these specific group of musicians. Two of the most important parts of the album, that would be Greg Brown's guitar and his songwriting, and Victor Damiani's bass, are absent from future Cake records. And then not to mention like Brown's songwriting, the guy who wrote The Distance. It sounds like Brown and Damiani's departures were kind of crushing for McRae. I think he was a little confounded by it. And I can see why those guys write such sticky parts that make these songs gel. They drive the songs. It's such an indispensable part of the sound. But you also have Todd Roper's drums, Vincent D'Onofrio's trumpet. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But you're a horn player, and you heard and probably appreciated a resurgence of horns throughout the 90s. There was ska punk, there was the swing revival in the 90s. But in all of those genres, I think horns are expected. And there's a very specific way in which horns are used, whether it's like, the swing revival or the ska thing. And with Cake, it feels like they're using it a little differently. I feel like it's not a horn section, it's a solo instrument. And as a trumpet player, like what are your thoughts on Vince DiFiore's trumpet playing and Cake's use of the trumpet?
The simple answer to both of those are brilliant. It's not, like you said, it's not used as like a horn section. The trumpet is never, driving something or, doing something repetitive just to like keep the energy of a song. Most of the time, it's a kind of just a small little solo to just fill in a bridge, leading into something else. Or, like in Italian Leather Sofa, it's a solo where, it's very deliberate and well thought out, and kind of showcasing, um say his name again.
Vince DiFiore's.
Vince, I'm really sorry. You may have always been Cake's trumpet player when I speak of you, but sir, you what you put down on Italian Leather Sofa is just pure woo. That is
Yeah.
hot. That's spicy. And you know what I did when I listened to Fashion Nugget when I was a kid and bought the album. I'm sitting in my room with my trumpet learning all the songs on the album. I'm like 14 or 15. Cake Fashion Nugget helped me be a better musician. It helped me sing harmonies. It helped me want to be good at trumpet playing, and so that's why this album has a very special place.
That's funny you say that because you don't really think about it, but as someone who was playing guitar, a little bit of bass at the time or whatever, like every album I could do that with, and that you don't have that luxury with horns. It is a really cool thing that sets them apart from other bands, and we used to hear that, like we had a band, we would play live and stuff, and like because of the trumpet, I think that people would be like, oh, like Cake, and just by virtue of the fact that it had a trumpet. But well, one of the things that fascinates me most about Cake in the mid 90s is just how different they were than other types of music. I'm going to read another John McCrae quote about Cake's approach to like formulating this sound, which was initially it was really angry. It was like sort of a reactionary stance against a lot of the sort of big dumb rock of the early 90s, which we thought was just another version of the big dumb rock from the 80s and 70s, a little bit bulbous, a little grandiose. So we just said we're going to have our sound be small. We're going to be able to hear everything clearly in our music, and we thought that was more subversive than turning up to 11. And I think that in that context, we were right. It does seem like so many of the albums that we gravitated toward in the 90s were drawing from the same version of this sort of ethos, which is the bands that resonated with me, I think with you too, were the bands that just kind of dared to be a little different. That would be a common theme throughout artists that we talk about in our conversations. It's always a reaction to like the status quo. In Cake's case, I know that they were playing on the same festival bills with what McCrae would kind of refer to as like hyper masculine Viking rock bands. And the fact that they had, I don't know, maybe courage is a little over the top, but the willingness and the desire to be something different, I think, is what makes Fashion Nugget outlive a lot of the musical output that came out in this time. And speaking of the music, are you ready for a list? You ready for a monster list of albums that came out in 1996?
Yes.
Okay. Here's what's going on in 1996. We have Rage Against the Machine's Evil Empire,
Wow.
uh, Beck's Odelay, which we're definitely talking about at some point. Weezer's Pinkerton, will probably hit that one
Oh,
too.
wow.
Tupac's All Eyes on Me, Fiona Apple's Title, Fuji's The Score, Sublime self-titled album, Ween's 12 Golden Country Greats, Wilco's Being There, Pearl Jam, No Code, Soundgarden, Down on the Upside, Super Furry Animals, Fuzzy Logic, Stone Temple Pilots, Tiny Music, songs from the Vatican Gift
Wow.
Shop, Eels, Beautiful Freak, REM, New Adventures in Hi-Fi, Underworld, The Second Toughest in the Infants, Outcast, ATLians. That's just how I always pronounce that album. I hope that's right. Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, Nada Surf's High Low. I mean, we're in the era
Wow.
also of the Spice Girls and Mariah Carey and Tony Braxton. You have Crossroads by Bone Thugs and Harmony. You have
Oh,
Macarena's
gosh.
going off. You also have a lot of albums like Marilyn Manson's Antichrist Superstar, Metallica's Load, and you might even include Evil Empire in that group of albums that I think that Cake was more of a reaction to. But it's clear here from looking at these albums that like the grunge movement has given way to other genres. And this is where artists like Beck and Cake and Ween are kind of charting new waters. I know I just threw a lot of music at you, but man, does hearing that list bring back some
Oh, yeah.
memories?
I think the memory that I want to discuss the most is, was the Crossroads the most played video on MTV of all
Oh
time?
man,
I
I
think
know.
I just remember coming home from school and can't wait to turn on MTV and like, let me see my jam, and the Crossroads is the first one you see, and then it's like 45 minutes later. It's like I think they had to play that video once an hour. But anyway, yeah, that was a pretty amazing list. When we discuss these great albums, the some of the common denominators have been when they come out, and they're so huge because I feel like it's worth commenting that we were probably I was probably 15, 14. I turned 15 later in that year. So I just think that's just such an impressionable time
Mm.
for music for you. And when you find something you like, you just gravitate towards it to so much. You were talking earlier about genre is almost being a lifestyle that you identify with. So as you're choosing these albums or the things that you're identifying with, it's almost like, it's like, well, this is the kind of lifestyle I'm gravitating towards. So Cake, it was quirky, but it was confident too. It's
Yeah.
like we're a little different, but we're not weird or weak or nerdy. It's like we've got this confidence of we're going to do a bunch of stuff, and oh, by the way, even though we don't play super loud, we're still badasses and we can rock just as hard as any of these other guys. We just prefer to do it in a different style.
Quirky, confident, just just not at all bashful about being themselves. I think that there starts to be a fan base for this type of approach, which is like it's like the people who are okay with genreless music or anti-genre, or it's like that starts to become its own sort of fan base, or people who are okay with being outside the box and being open to other things. So yeah, okay, man, we're getting into it. We're gonna jump right into Frank Sinatra here. The opener,
Yes.
like any great opener, this introduces many of the album's best elements. You have the keyboard that starts things off, the muted trumpet, McRae's acoustic guitar, which I think that's the other thing. Like you have McRae's voice and you have that tinny sort of sounding guitar in the background, which I believe, not 100% sure, but I think he's just running his acoustic guitar through an amp, probably using some cheap acoustic pickups. I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of distortion or fuzz or a little bit of dirt on there. It could just be amped with a little bit of dirt on it. I don't know, but it's a very distinct part of the sound that is like in every Cake album. Frank Sinatra's four chords in E minor repeated throughout. Just the same chord progression over and over. No real chorus. Instead, you have a series of instrumental breaks. You have the guitar and trumpet kind of swapping out on lead. When they played this live, at least versions I've seen, I saw McRae play the keyboard riff on his acoustic, which I thought was an interesting choice. Cool use of this song in a Sopranos episode. There's like Chrissy's kind of in a, I don't know, in a state and like throwing a bunch of papers away. But anyway, that kind of stands out as a cool use of this. The actual subject of these lyrics, a bit abstract, but the imagery and the word choices, I love, man. I love the opening lyric. We know of an ancient radiation that haunts dismembered constellations, a faintly glimmering radio station. I don't know if that's nostalgia for an era where Sinatra like ruled the airways, or maybe a futuristic dystopian story where radio transmissions are still bouncing around the cosmos. I think you could interpret the lyrics in many different ways, and maybe the lyrics just had a phonetic appeal and it just sounds good, kind of like how Beck does it. Yeah, any thoughts on Frank Sinatra?
Gosh, you did a great job there, but yeah, that sound, what is that? Is that a synthesizer in that?
I've wondered that too, which is one of the reasons I was watching it live. I wanted to see how they pulled that off and whether it was a
And so
synth.
that's what you were talking about him playing on
Yeah,
his.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's an organ. I think it's
Oh,
sort of
yeah,
like an
organ.
organ sounding
Yeah,
thing in just a deeper register, but it's kind of unique sounding. I can't quite put my finger on it. So
right.
when I saw him play the riff on his acoustic, I thought, well, that's cool, but I wanted I wanted to try to figure out what you're doing.
I mean, there's even something about that sound, that organ sound, just right off the bat that catches your attention. And you're
Yeah,
like, what is this?
yeah,
And let me pay attention. And then those lyrics come out, and you're like, wait a minute, this guy's singing in a lower register, like a little different than we're used to. What in the world is he talking about? And it's
yeah.
so smart. You had some good quotes there from John McCrae. I saw an interview that he did maybe 15 years ago, and it was kind of those same sentiments. Everything that was popular in the early 90s was guys being really loud, but like whining about their plight in life.
Right.
It was like all this angst, and I'm upset and I'm gonna be real loud about it. And so they were like, let's do something different. You read those lyrics and then you read those quote and the words that he used. I mean, you can obviously tell this guy's a highly intelligent individual and intellectual, and the lyrics are intellectual, and that's cool. It's I loved a lot of, I love Nirvana and some other bands, and then you read the lyrics, and sometimes the lyrics aren't really saying a whole lot.
Mhm.
It's just kind of words that are rhyming and familiar and easy to pick up on, but I'm not really saying a whole lot. And you just read those lyrics. Maybe they don't say a whole lot either. Maybe it's like Beck just using words that sound, for phonetic sounds that
Mhm.
sound good together. Maybe that's true, but it's causing you to think. It's using your
Yes.
brain. It's not just hearing "woe is me" and "why is this happening to me" and
Yeah, yeah, it puts you in another it's like taking you into this different world. It feels like
yes,
it brings you right in there with the sound that you're talking about. Like it's familiar, but it's kind of otherworldly. And where are we? What are we talking about?
right. Now I'm picturing
Really,
Chinese lamps, and I'm like,
yeah,
what does a Chinese lamp look like? Have I seen a
right,
Chinese lamp? And but
yeah,
all this imagery, you're getting all this
yes,
imagery because he's using cool words and thoughtful, poetic lyrics to get your brain thinking. And like you said, you're immediately transported to a different place where this guy's got a house full of junk and there's Chinese
yeah.
lamps and and Frank Sinatra is playing on a record player or something,
Yeah.
and so you're just you can't help but visualize all this.
I don't know Sacramento. Sacramento's such a key part of like the Cake story, and it's like their home base. It's where they formed and all that stuff. It makes me think that it's some sort of crossroad of like of different genres and styles and all of that stuff. It's probably if you live there, you're probably like, oh, it's just a city. But I don't know. A part of me wonders if a lot of this stuff comes from somebody who has lived in that space that maybe has a confluence of different influences and then the other thing is, I guess quickly, I'll just mention that the video for Frank Sinatra. I don't think I'd actually seen that. I don't remember seeing it back in the day, but I did watch it to prepare for this, and it's good. I feel like they did a lot of their own videos. There's always this kind of theme of which I think this will segue well into the next track, "The Distance." But there's this theme of fighting against the rat race, sort of a discomfort with maybe commercialism and consumerism, maybe even capitalism. I don't know. There's a whole sort of pushing against the norms of the day. I think not only musically, but like with the ideas that they're presenting, and that yeah. So that takes us into "The Distance," which is Cake's most well known song, I would venture to say, and written not by John McCrae, but by guitarist Greg Brown. I noticed that some people suggest that this is some version of rap rock, which I don't necessarily agree with. I mean, there are clearly cues that Cake takes from R&B and hip hop arrangements and instrumentation, but this feels really to me more just like McCrae's flat staccato delivery, maybe in a spoken word more type of thing. But I mean, whatever you want to call it, it's I mean, this song's amazing.
Right.
It's a banger. It's you've got the chromatic bass line, the slick double stop guitar lines, which I remember learning to play that, and it felt like a magic trick just being able to play those. The hip hop style synths in the background, great backing vocals, just like on every song on this album. I mean, this song kind of embodies what Cake is does best, which is just managing to be, like you said, quirky, maybe a little nerdy, but just also super cool. Like this is a
Right.
cool song. You think Cake's "The Distance" probably introduced you to Cake as a band?
Oh, definitely. I love The Distance and I love this song. And it was definitely the reason why I knew who Cake was and the reason why somebody, probably one of my friends, bought the album. When I first heard the album start to finish, it's one of those nice surprises where, oh my goodness, every song is awesome. And every song is awesome and don't really sound like The Distance. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
couple of songs that you could say, okay, this is in the same kind of ballpark, but I don't think, they weren't the banger like The Distance was. But, you know, when I owned the album and fell in love with it, probably The Distance wasn't even in my top half of the favorite songs. What's great about a song like The Distance is it bridges genre gaps.
Yes.
people will be drawn to this that don't even like rock music because they hear the driving bass line and the synths, and it almost does sound like a hip hop song if John McCrae wasn't doing what he was doing and somebody just rapped over it. I'm sure somebody could take the distance and just rap over it and it would be a banger, you know. Awesome song, the musicianship just unbelievable. I feel like you could put the distance on pretty much in any city in America and everybody in the room's going to know it. You know, it's
Yeah.
like you couldn't hide from this song. It was everywhere in the mid 90s.
And it lingers too. You're right. I think this is probably on like a lot of people's like gym playlist, like workout playlist, and they don't even know the band. They just like the song. I love the lyrics of the song. McCrae has said he had I think it was on the Professor of Rock YouTube channel with an interview with that guy, and he said that it's about failure. Um, and failure and success, and the failure of success, I think, is how he phrased it. But it's clearly the idea that the hero of the story is a man who's lost a race, but is compelled to keep going. I don't know. I mean, I think it's open to interpretation. I think in the process of doing so, maybe he loses the thing that motivates him, whatever the woman that he's singing about is, or maybe those are just interchangeable characters in the same story. It's likely symbolic of any pursuit of success. I couldn't find any interviews of Greg Brown's account of the lyrics, knowing that he wrote them, but it's an impressive contribution to the album. Greg Brown he had three co-writing credits on Motorcade and two writing credits on Fashion Nugget, co-writing another one, but this is the only Cake song that is written entirely by Greg Brown, who left the band shortly after this album came out. But yeah, just a great song. And then it takes us into another, I think, quintessential Cake song. I could say that about every album, every song on this album, but Friend is a Four-Letter Word is in the same gear, it's almost in the same gear as Frank Sinatra, though it's a little slower. More than any other song on the album, it has a very dynamic range. You think about the subtle guitar picking in the beginning versus like the energy during that instrumental sort of climax in the second part of the song where the trumpets really go in, the horns really shine. It's sort of a testament to the power of a slow tempo song. They bring up the energy instead of like going to a higher BPM, you know?
Right.
Um, I think McCrae's country influences are really strong on this song, and I don't think it sounds like a country song like a lot of the other songs on the album. But lyrically, I think there's a strong connection. I mean, you could take "Friend" is a four-letter word that could be a top 40 country song. You know,
Definitely.
it's catchy. It has that sort of like it's sticky in that way. And even though it's clever, somewhat cheeky lyric, there's a lot of gravity in this song, and I think it's because of the arrangement and all that stuff. Friend is a four-letter word. It hits hard.
What you said about the changing dynamics, as soon as you say the song title, I'm like feeling the real trumpet drive in the second half of the song, building to the climax. But then, you know, that quirky beginning, kind of like how he delivers the lyrics, you know, the melody line, you know, kind of makes it quirky. You know, I don't know if I'd ever thought of that before, but as you're saying, that is so right that this could be a country hit. Um, and I hear that country influence in there now. I don't know that I'd thought about that one as one of the more country influence, but yeah, gosh, what a great song. It's it's a beautiful song with well thought out lyrics. You know, beautiful singing. I love the harmonies. This whole album just has unbelievable harmonies. Like it has harmonies that are kind of traditional where the vocalists are singing the same lyrics in the same time, but then there's also cool, I mean, the album is full of awesome harmonies that are, you know, off time or they're singing different lyrics, you know, at different times, and so yeah, friend is a four-letter word is definitely one of my favorites on this album.
And what you said about the harmonies there, I think really apply to Open Book too, the next song. One of my favorites on this album. I love this song. I don't know what planet this song comes from. I don't know how you write a song like this. This song plays a lot with dissonance in the intro and in the verses. There are moments when harmonically, like you think, where are we? Where are we headed? It's almost disorienting some of the parts of Open Book. And then it resolves into this like beautifully catchy and melodic chorus that's sort of euphoric in a way. But the verses feel like almost dangerous because of that conflict, and the chorus feels triumphant. Another great solo from Greg Brown. Damiani's bass line just really drives the entire song. I think that's true for so many songs on this album. Damiani's the bass playing on this entire album is very Paul McCartney like to me. It's very bouncy, very melodic. It's catchy. It feels effortless. It's almost like, he didn't write the bass part as much as it just sort of springs from his fingers naturally. And yeah, the resolution of that catchy chorus again kind of flirts with dissonance, and because of those harmonies that you're talking about, they're a little untraditional, where they're forming a chord, and it's not a traditional chord. It's a chord that wants to be resolved, and when that
Right.
resolution happens, it really hits.
Yes. Um, gosh, this may be my favorite song on the album. It's like, different parts of my life, my favorite song changes, but this song is so dancey. Open Book, I'm talking about. Open Book is just like, you're talking about that intro where it's like, it starts out and then it's almost like a record skips and a DJ just like, it's like in an electronica song when like the thing happens, where everybody's dancing now. It's like it just hits that thing and the bass line comes in and it's like, oh gosh, what just happened? And
Yeah,
now I've gone from whatever friend is a four-letter word is, and now I'm back to like almost hip hop dancing, like
yeah,
the distance,
yeah,
so I loved pulling Cake out and playing it for people who never heard Cake before, and I was like, whoa, dude, before you judge them, like check this out. Like if this
yeah,
isn't a groove, I don't know what you're looking for. And then but then you it's so cool and such a groove, and then you have those dissonant harmonies that you were talking, or not dissonant, just like you said, an unresolved chord where
yeah,
when you play, when you just have guys singing like that together, it's like if you just took everything down from the song and just had those vocals on there, people would be like, "Ouch!" Like, "Whoa, what are we
yeah.
doing?" And
Right.
and Cake puts them out there naked and lets them hang. It's like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna hit this chord, and we're just gonna hold it like a barbershop quartet while I finish my line, which is like extremely brave. You said I don't know if
yeah,
I call it brave, but
but
it's almost like showing off. It's
yeah.
it's almost like we're such good singers that we're going to hit this barbershop quartet chord in the middle of this giant groove and show you what good singers we are.
I wish I'd done my homework and figured out what the chord was, but it's so true. And the lyrics are clever here too. The you in the song, you think she's an open book. I feel like it's just someone who's wrapped up in their own stuff. The woman mentioned in the song is far more complex than the subject of the song is willing to admit. Obviously, I mean that's kind of reading it quite literally, but I wonder if the song is similar to a song like "This Boy" from the Beatles or something, or any other song where the singer or the narrator has feelings for the woman in the song. He's critiquing another person's ability to do right by her. But it's not explicit whether the narrator is emotionally involved or just a casual observer. But another just like really clever line, too. You
I
think she's an
love
open book.
Yeah, I love the lyrics of this song.
Yeah.
They're just so cool, talking about how she's writing a novel and that the song's open book, but each verse, the words that he chooses to rhyme.
But you're caught in your own story. you're caught in your own glory. You're believing your own stories, timing your contractions, inventing
Inventing
small
small
contraptions that
contraptions.
roll across your polished hardwood
Oh
floors.
my gosh, that I mean, I just love that.
It's great. It's
Yeah,
great. I mean, the way he uses words, the way he uses language, it's really unique. I mean, it's a huge selling point of the album. And I'm like you, I don't think about lyrics as much as a lot of listeners do. I think it's certainly true back then. Maybe now I'll take a little bit more time, but even then, I'll know songs for years and not really know the lyrics or really have pondered them very much. With Cake, it's in researching this album, I was surprised at how like I didn't have to go look up the lyrics that much. I just kind of knew them. And I think it's because of the way he articulates it and the way and just how well written they are. They're sticky, they're memorable.
right.
And this coming from someone who's not like a lyric guy necessarily. You know
I
what I
feel
mean?
like yeah, I feel like there's a lot of very notable people, guys that were had staying power in rock and roll, in pop rock and roll that are very successful that when they started didn't have a lot of confidence. And for whatever reason, whether you're listening to somebody from another country or the person singing just chooses not to articulate the lyrics very much, but when you have those songs, you don't ever consider the lyrics, I don't think, unless you just go search for them yourself and
Yeah.
learn them. But with Cake, it's totally different. He's delivering the lyric with purpose and the way he sings it, and so they stick in your head because you get it the first time, and they're clever, and you end up remembering them because you've heard them and comprehend them. So yeah, the lyrics in this album are unbelievable.
Like Open Book, Daria has a verse that's in a minor key, has a vine that really leans into minor tones and introduces dissonance that eventually get resolved in the chorus to the point where it's like there's parts of Daria that border on being unsettling musically. I love the piano line in the intro and the verses and how it interplays with the lead guitar. The trumpet adds this jazzy layer to the song, which I think it just gives this song and just Cake sound more depth. You know, we've talked a lot about our guy Vince. I feel like I can hear McCrae having a fun time writing the lyrics to Daria too. I mean, it's almost like how many rhyming words can I think of when naming things that can be smoothed over? Uh,
Right.
it just sounds fun. I think
Yes.
he's kind of cooking here, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Daria was probably my first favorite song on this album. It's just I don't know what it is. Like first listen, I think this was the first, maybe Open Book, but this is the next song after Open Book. Both of these songs have those really fun, catchy lyrics that, you know, upon first listen, you're just like, what in the world is up with this guy? Like he is who, are you serious right now? These are the lyrics you're gonna sing. I remember thinking as a 14 or 15-year-old, I'm like, what in the world is he talking about being in her mattress in 1982? I'm like, what? What in the
I
world?
Yeah, I still don't know. I still don't know what it
I mean,
means,
I think I
but
know what he means, but that's a weird way of saying it.
and that's what's so great about it. I totally agree. And then that takes us into Race Car Ya Ya. It's a very short song, a minute and 21 seconds. This one has all of the dissonance and unsettling arrangements of the previous two songs, but does not give listeners a resolution. It's just the dissonance. The lyrics are fun. They sound kind of serious and they conjure great imagery. Like the line large fuzzy dice still hang proudly like testicles from rear view mirrors.
As a 14-year-old listening to this, what else do you want? You know, I mean, here's something we can really hang our hat on and be like, can you believe he just said that? Still hang proudly like testicles from rearview mirrors.
It's hard to think of another writer who would even dare write those lyrics. And it's funny how he returns to the human anatomy a few times in this album, and body parts kind of have like their own personality and status apart from the rest of the body. Like the testicles are proud, the
Yes.
breasts are healthy in
Yeah.
Italian leather sofa, like they're their own self-contained thing, which I don't know, but I really get a kick out of. I really think that's a fun whatever device that is fun.
When we were preparing to talk about this, I was thinking, what in the world made them think, dude, we've got to put race car yayas on this album?
It's
Like,
true.
like I
Is it a
it just
statement of some
it
sort?
just feels like an incomplete song. And
Yeah,
then the fact that somebody was like, "No, that is so good." Like, "No,
that
that's
has
re"
to go.
yeah, that the testicle song that where you drop the testicles line, that's gonna get them, man.
Yeah, that's gotta be on there because someone that conversation had to happen and they fought for it, um, and it's on there now, and it's for all of us to enjoy. I Will Survive, the first of three cover songs on this album, which another thing I love about Cake and I really appreciate about Fashion Nugget. McCrae says that playing other people's songs is one of the best things a songwriter can do because they get in the head of another writer. He remembered hearing this when he was a kid on his way to the orthodontist, and he didn't know what it meant. He didn't understand the lyrics, but it made him feel a certain way, and I love what Cake does with it. It was a huge hit for Gloria Gaynor in 1978. She was famously not a fan of Cake's version of this song because of the profanity that McCrae introduced to the lyrics. I think it's another great example of their ability to tackle these different genres and run it through the Cake machine so that it sounds like it was written by the band. I think that makes them distinct from other artists. Like even like Beck, talk a lot about how he can go to different genres because Beck fully immerses himself in genres and his records can sound radically different from one record to the next. But he can go full folk or do funk or he can do psychedelic stuff. I mean, it sounds so different, except for Beck's voice, obviously. Whereas Cake, I mean, they play with similar genres and it always sounds like them. I love both those artists, by the way. It's not that one approach is better or worse. I don't even know if it's deliberate on Cake's part, but that strikes me a lot. And then, of course, the bass in this song is unbelievable. It carries the load. It allows the guitar to kind of do its own thing because it's anchoring the song. It allows the trumpet to elevate the song to another level. I mean, in Greg Brown's guitar, I can't say enough about it. For a guitar nerd, this guy's just such an endless source of joy. The trumpet gives it that triumphant lift that it needs. It has a somewhat sort of mournful overtone as well in this song. That's sort of a pump up song. Part of that's the way the song was written, but they're borrowing from parts of the original arrangement, but they're also introducing their own elements. It's just really great how Cake does a relatively straight up cover that again just sounds like a Cake song.
It's I was gonna say, if someone had never heard "I Will Survive" before, but I feel like even, like, nine-year-old kids in 1996 had already heard "I Will Survive." It's just such an
Yeah.
iconic song, such a
Yeah.
big hit that you would hear in movies and commercials, maybe, you just hear it a lot. But then, but Cake did such a good job of making it their own that you could imagine maybe somebody hearing them play that and maybe they had never heard the original before and just assume that was a Cake original song. And here's another song where, whether it was deliberate or not, just a masterful thing to do from a marketing standpoint, just like The Distance was, where this is going to bridge gaps. Fans of all genres are going to like this song, because
Yeah.
some people are going to just love the original "I Will Survive" so much that they're going to like this too, just because it's a good version of the song they already like. But yeah, gosh, as you were talking about the bass playing on this song, I had to go back and think, gosh, and it is. I mean, it's just it almost sounds like it has to be done with something that's not a bass guitar, because
Right.
imagining somebody getting a bass to do, to play with that kind of rhythm is just almost mind blowing, but yeah, golly, what a great song. And you know what? I was listening to this song the other day, and I was thinking about the F word that John McCrae puts in there. It serves a purpose.
It
You know,
does.
this song is about somebody getting crapped on,
Yeah.
and they're like, I've had enough, and I'm gonna reinvent myself. And that F word works. It
It
shows
does.
you, it's like, because you've got this beautiful song, but it's the lyrics don't match the beautiful song. The lyrics
Yeah.
are, I'm pissed and I'm mad and I'm not taking it anymore. And the F word needs to be said right there. And
It's it's
that
a defiant song.
yeah. Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. I was just gonna say, didn't they release "I Will Survive"?
Yeah, it was a single, and I mean,
Yeah,
and it's funny too. I think they had to like bleep it, and if you watch the videos, like they just kind of like, or they don't bleep it, they just cut it out. But it's funny. I think the original lyric is like, "I should have changed my stupid lock," and probably singing that doesn't even feel right. Like it feels
right.
like change my stupid lock. It needs to be changed my effing lock. Like
Yeah, yeah.
you're right. It's not a gratuitous use of the f word. It's
No,
like I mean,
no.
it feels
It
real.
serves a very meaningful purpose. Yeah. You would think that maybe they had an idea that was gonna be a single before they recorded it, and were like, "It'd be a lot easier if we didn't have that F word in there."
Right.
It's like, "Nope,
Right.
the F word's gonna go in there. If we release it, you figure out the F word."
Yeah, the proud testicles and the F word, they're staying. And then we get into stick shifts and safety belts. I have a personal just love for this song. It is sort of a straight up country song, but it's like this is Greg Brown really just doing his thing and showcasing how deeply he can go into one genre. In this case, which would be that country guitar. A little geekery on what I could find out about Greg Brown's guitar setup. He plays, you can see him playing a 1965 Guild Starfire 3, and it's like a very distinctive guitar. I've read that he ran a Proco Rat distortion pedal, which is the same pedal that like a ton of dudes use, like Graham Coxon uses that one, but supposedly he ran that into a Silvertone amp. I've seen some live performances where he's using a Marshall stack too. Gear aside, this guy has serious chops. Like you were talking about Vince DiFiore's trumpet playing. I mean, and you can hear Brown's how good of a player he is on most of the songs of the album, but Stitches and Safety Belts is just an example of how fluent he is in that country style. And it is fast, man. That's a tricky one. When I sit around and I play along with the album, this one's pushing it. The speed of which that he's playing this stuff so comfortably is really impressive and a lot of fun to listen to as well.
Do you think he probably plays some other instruments like mandolin and banjo? Like, when you hear him play something like this, you're like, "This guy almost sounds like he's got some bluegrass background."
Bluegrass, I can definitely hear that. You're so right. The riffs very much sound like they could be like a flat picking on an acoustic guitar. You don't play a riff like that if you're just a casual, like you're just dipping into the genre for a song. You know what I mean? Like you play that if you know this type of guitar. There's a lot of examples of him playing in a country sort of style. So he's clearly like steeped in that style, but then he's, throughout this album, he's going into other genres too. And a song like The Distance, which has some of those double stops I was talking about, like I don't even know what you would call that. Or I mean, we'll get into Nugget, but like it's another example of like a funk sort of thing. And this guy can just do it all. I'm totally fascinated by that guy. But he goes on to, after Cake, he's in a band called Death Ray. And they're almost more of like a new wave sounding band, like something that doesn't draw on any of these influences. So I would love to get into that guy's head. I've tracked down his Bandcamp because he had a new album that came out in 2023, or like an EP, not a full album, but it was really, I mean, it's great too. I strongly recommend everybody check that out. I think it's listed as Gregory Brown. But I tried to find the guy. I tried to reach out to him. I doubt he ever got my email, but I was like, I have questions and I need you to answer them. Actually, I did end up hearing from Greg Brown after we recorded this episode. He got back in touch with me. He was very generous in answering my questions about his playing, about Fashion Nugget. He mentioned that as far as the influences went into making Fashion Nugget, John and Greg collaborated frequently from 1991 to 1995. Their focus was really on trying to combine classic country, think Carter Family, George Jones, Buck Owens, with classic soul like Gladys Knight, Marvin Gaye, Barry White, and then filtering that through the lens of personal influences like AM pop, FM rock, punk, and indie. So the effort was really centered on the idea that a good song is a good song, whatever genre it is. Greg mentioned that there was a particular Sex Pistol song that John said would make a great country song. It was that sort of mindset that went into the songwriting process of the material that we hear on Fashion Nugget. Greg says that for him, the foundation of Cake is John's exceptional songwriting, his voice, charisma. And then in the early days, they would typically listen to records for hours and then see if they could find a way to shoehorn John's eclectic songs into these well-defined musical languages. They played clubs, bars up and down the West Coast, like Sacramento, Stockton, Bakersfield, the Bay Area, LA, Portland, Seattle, everywhere in between. Sacramento was a very cheap place to live in the 1990s. Greg paid $295 a month for a one-bedroom apartment on F Street in Sacramento. So they were able to live on their live performance money. And when things got tight, they could just find part-time work. But all of this he mentioned to really get across the idea that what you hear on Fashion Nugget was really what you were hearing if you saw Cake live. It was essentially their live set at the time with a few overdubs. So I did mention him all the talk about the musical gear that I talk about in this episode, and he confirmed what I was mentioning about his rig at the time. He said actually is a 1965 Starfire 3 that he played. Those guitars, beautifully made, easy to play with a narrow neck, and he would stuff foam inside the guitar to reduce feedback at high volumes. And he modified the Silvertone 1484 with 100 watt Eminence brand speakers, which at the time were the cheapest available. It made the cabinet extremely heavy, he said, but the oversized speakers reduced distortion at the amp's max volume. And that was important because the bars that they played at the time were always filled with people talking loudly. So if the guitar was too distorted, it lost definition, and obviously that's a big part of Cake's sound. I mentioned to him, hey, I've seen you playing some other amps in live performances too, and he just said basically when touring, he would use whatever the backline venue they provided. But he also talked about how it was really a great experience making Fashion Nugget. They were, again, just coming off incessant van touring across the states in support of their first album, Motorcade of Generosity, on Capricorn Records. It's really fun for the band. Also very grueling to do van touring. You're going to have the typical fights that go on. In his hindsight, I think he looks back fondly on it. He said it's, all of that is funny. So they went to the studio very rehearsed, but there was also some of that energy, some of that hostility that builds up on the road. At the end of the day, they just wanted to make a good record. The favorite track that he mentioned on the album is Frank Sinatra. And this is an interesting tidbit that he told me that isn't really widely known. Frank Sinatra is two completely different takes from two different studios that are then spliced together. The intro and the outro were taken from an earlier version that they recorded at Puss Cavern Studios in North Highlands, and then the body of the song was recorded, like most of the record, at Paradise Studios in South Sacramento. You can hear the difference in quality in the recordings. The intro and the outro have less low end than the body of the song, and there's also a spike in mid-range frequency. So super interesting to hear those facts. I never thought that about Frank Sinatra, but now I know, and I can take that with me when I listen to the song. Very generous of Greg Brown to respond. Really, it's when you admire someone for that long and you have a really pleasant interaction with them, it's always a cool thing. Anyway, back to the show.
Stick shifts and safety belts is my wife's favorite Cake song, and, um, I could say was probably one of my at one point was probably my favorite song on this album because it's just
Yeah.
so cool, and the harmonies, I love
Oh,
what the song's about, I love the lyrics, I love the harmonies. I said something earlier like a barbershop quartet. This has kinda got that, like, the harmonies are so good. It's
yeah.
like, it's something that could be from, like, a band of just vocalists, which I
Yeah.
don't know. I haven't done enough research on the album. It could just be John McCrae just doing every voice, or it might be, other members of the band. I've seen them live, and it was probably after Greg Brown and the bass player,
Yeah.
left, and I don't remember them doing, like, awesome harmonies live.
And I do know that they try to sing some live and you can hear it. And if you see it with like Greg Brown and those guys, like you do have a few of them singing too. But yeah, I'm with you. I think I was at the same show that you were at there in Louisville.
Oh,
And I
right,
can't even
yeah,
remember when that was, but it was like in the early 2000s, I think,
right.
had to have been. And yeah, I feel like, I don't know whether I feel like maybe the trumpet player can sing some harmonies. I
Yes,
don't know if I
I
see the
think he
drummer do it
does.
much, but Greg Brown definitely was singing some harmonies there, and so I don't know what it is either, but it's one of the that's a huge part of the song. And then the other thing is, I mean, I don't get to call out the drummers enough, but like Todd Roper is like, he's again like very just comfortable in this genre that they're playing. There's a fast version of this genre too. It's not like it's not a slow BPM sort of song. So you have this energy that's going on, and that's going to kind of showcase it. If you're at ease in this genre, it's going to show. And I think the drums, the style of it too, is just another. This song just moves from the beginning, and it's super catchy.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the best. And then that takes us to a song that we know very well, perhaps, perhaps, perhaps. And how Cake landed on this song is a mystery to me. It's so perfect on this album, though. It was originally a Spanish language hit for Puerto Rican singer and writer Bobby Capo in 1948. Doris Day had a famous version of the song in 65, but it's been recorded by like Bing Crosby, Nat King Cole, Cliff Richard. But it's a perfect fit for Cake. It's a
Yeah.
perfect fit for this album. I did pull a quote again. I mean, we keep going back to covers and all this stuff, but here's a quote from John McCrae about covering songs. I do have a few sort of axioms about playing a cover. One is that you should be able to bring something new to it. If you're going to do it, you shouldn't just be aping what somebody else did in a way that's not bringing some sort of new element to it. I guess what I'm saying is that I think even just the term cover, I feel like there's a little bit of smothering these songs. It feels like putting it into sort of a lesser category. And I've got theories that this hangup doesn't exist in the world of country. It doesn't really exist in the world of jazz. And it's an interesting point. You can have classic country albums or jazz albums, and there are going to be plenty of numbers where it's not about like, this isn't the band that necessarily wrote this. It's just their interpretation of it that is so memorable. I mean, that's why you have jazz songbooks and standards. It's not about that necessarily. It's not about the origination of the song. It's about the execution of it and how you do it. I think that speaks to their approach, and it's not something you see a ton of. There aren't a ton of cover songs, but this whole thing, the minor key aspect of it, the syncopation, I mean, it's a really infectious song that I think early on was one of my favorites.
Being a trumpet player, I just love the little trumpet fills. They're so intricate, and the notes that he chooses to hit are just really cool. And I mean, this is one because a lot of the covers of this song were done a long time ago. A lot of people wouldn't know that this is not a Cake song. That's a testament to how well Cake does the song and how diverse they are in being able to make songs their own and sound good playing any style. But yeah, I'm so glad you read that quote because it's true. Country people, record each other's music all the time. Jazz was the same way. It's like, if you're going to play this genre of music, you better know how to do a good version
Yep.
of this song. It's like, because
Yeah.
everybody who's come before you's done a great version of this song. So, yeah, why do we look at it in pop music and rock music as like a lesser thing? You know, it's like, oh, that's not your original song. It shouldn't matter.
And the fact that this album has three of them on there, I think is just like it shows that it's a core belief of John McCrae's. And then we get to It's Coming Down, another personal favorite of mine. What planet did this song come from? Another thing I've said a couple times here. I can't fit this into a genre. The horn really gives us like an almost like Egyptian sound or something. I don't know. The harmonies, again, like it sets this thing apart. Like so many songs on this album, there's the minor key aspect of it, angsty harmonic undertone that resolves into this sort of beautiful chorus, and it just dips back into unresolved territory. I don't know what it is about this song. One of my favorites. I come back to it all the time.
One of my favorites too. It has the harmony kind of like in Open Book, where they hit a chord and hold it for a long time while John McCrae finishes the line, and then we have all these harmonies where they're singing at different times. You know, a lot of imagery comes with these lyrics too.
And it takes us into Nugget, more straightforward than the other songs on the album, especially in the term of dynamics. Like it's just so funky because I have the bass, drums, and the guitar give this driving groove. I love this song, and it's such a catchy sing along chorus. This I love that earlier when we were talking about I Will Survive, and you talked about the F bomb and how that could be a second thought. If you're going to make this song commercial, do you really want to be doing that in this song? You know that labels have that kind of conversations with artists all the time. It had to be a conversation here, right? Because
Right.
this song is one that like I don't know why this wasn't playing at parties with people singing it at the top of their lungs. You're essentially saying when you make this your chorus, the main line that you sing it over and over, you're saying that there's no way this song gets airplay because this would get traction otherwise. It's like a deliberate sabotage of the song by use of the F bomb, but it has to
Right.
be the F bomb. Like he has to say that there. There's a Harry Nilsson song where it's called You're Breaking My Heart. And it also is the same thing, you know, a deliberate use of it. They try to talk him out of it. And he's like, no, this is how the song is. And Cake does the same thing here. I love it. I love Nugget. It's so funky.
Yeah, gosh, I love this song. This is always one of my favorite songs, and at times I'll be like, "Yep, that's the best song on the album." And it's because it's so funky, and it
Yeah.
I do kind of think this song is like a hip hop song. I don't think
Yeah.
it's I don't think it's like spoken word or you know, I think he's definitely rapping here, and I think it's cool. I just love the lyrics. They're all fun. They're fun to say. They're clever. They kind of roll off your phonetically roll out of your mouth, and yeah, and then the chorus is shut the F. Shut the F. Shut the F. And everybody in the background, the band's out it. Like on the distance where we're all gonna chant in the background. Okay, now everybody chant this all together. Shut
Yeah.
the
It's like, here you go. Release this. Um, Heads of state who ride and wrangle, who look at your face from more than one angle, can cut you from their bloated budgets like sharpened knives through chicken McNuggets.
F.
Dude, I don't know. I don't know what it means, but man, that's fun. This album never really loses steam. It never really loses energy. It
No.
definitely has moments where it sits like in lower tempos, even like lower dynamics and all of that stuff. But it doesn't feel like it. I mean, this album moves quickly, I feel like. But
Yes.
Nugget, you get there and you're like, okay, we're into the back stretch of this album now. God, I love that song. And then it takes us into, I'm saying this a lot, another personal favorite. She'll Come Back to Me might be my favorite song on this album. And for me, I think it's because of the combination of that steel guitar that you hear in the background. It's just, I love hearing a steel guitar out of its normal context. And this is basically a country song, but it's a Cake take on it. And it doesn't sound like a straight up country song. So when you hear the use of a steel guitar outside of that traditional country role into something a little different, even though it's technically doing its traditional country thing. That combined with the funky bass line in this song, and then the drums and the bass, like the way that the bass line is carrying this thing, it has that steady, it's just in lockstep with the bass, and you have that sort of soaring, mournful steel guitar on top of it. You put it through the cake machine, all these different layers are just infectious, and I absolutely love She'll Come Back to Me. I think I have to say that's my favorite song on the album.
I would not have guessed that that's your favorite song on there. Not that it, you know, just because I think it's got that country feel to
Yeah,
it, but gosh, when you do it that well, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just a great song. Like you said, that I mean, as soon as you say the name, I can hear that steel guitar. Those little
yeah.
fills are just so choicey, and I love the beautiful lyrics. And you know, it's one of those songs where I almost had to check. I was like, is this one a cover too? Because it
Right.
sounds so classic and so good. It's like I could see this song being written 50 years ago.
It's just a sad country song. It would totally make sense if this came from like the late 40s or early 50s country, some Ernest Tubb song. All day I wait and wait to hear the footsteps on my walkway. She never came. She never even called, but she'll come back to me. It's so simple, so catchy. And I think for a lot of people, it's probably just like part of the stream of this album. It just kind of gets lost in everything else. For some reason, it's always just that song I think sticks with me more than any other. And then it sounds like we're getting to one of your favorites here, which is Italian Leather Sofa. McRae, Brown, Roper, Damiani, these guys, they all form such a tight groove. I think this is like one of the most grooved songs on the album. This starts off pretty straightforward, upbeat song, but the lyrics to the chorus are just so peculiar. It's a snapshot of a rich couple who are just in it for the lifestyle, I think. But things musically get strange in the middle of the breakdown of the song, which I bet is what really gets you going here, because I love the trumpet player's work. It's my favorite part of the song is that, and how heavy those jazz elements. And like you said, I mean, there's some virtuosic action going on here. Yeah, tell me about Italian Leather Sofa.
I think this is my favorite song on this album, at least today. It's the groove. It's got that tinny guitar that you were saying earlier. I think I know what the song's about. You know, a lot of imagery here with
Yes.
the healthy breast that bounce.
Right.
Then what makes the song is, I mean, they just take off onto this whole nother place. It's like they go on a
Yeah.
jam, and we're just fortunate that we get to sit in. And yeah, that the trumpet playing on this part, that was where I figured out. I was like, oh, you know, because when you see Cake play, Vince, is Vince still in the band?
Yes,
Yeah, so he's playing keyboard too a lot.
he is.
Um, and so some songs he's playing keyboard and trumpet in the same song, and he might just have one hand on the trumpet. And so
Yeah.
you're thinking, okay, is the trumpet just kind of like a little extra thing that's like kind of a second thought? And then you get to Italian Leather Sofa, and you're like, oh no, the trumpet is never a second thought. I mean, this
Yeah.
guy is laying it down. This song is fun and quirky and cool, and just a really neat song.
She's got a serrated edge that moves back and forth. It's such a simple machine. She doesn't have to use force.
When she gets what she wants, she puts the rest on a plate in a Ziploc bag in the
In the
freezer.
freezer.
Yeah.
I mean, man, how can you not love it? And then it takes us out to the finale of the album. I like how they do the soft exit. It's great when bands end with something huge, but when I don't think this is the album necessarily going out quiet, even though that's literally how it goes out, because it's powerful in its own way. I think I love the trumpet work on Sad Songs and Waltzes, but this is a beautiful take on Willie Nelson's original version. I think that Greg Brown's guitar, McRae's delayed deadpan delivery. They're kind of the heart of this. They totally nail the country harmonies in this song. Not a surprise. But yeah, the little flourishes from Vince DiFiore, I think it kind of gives it this unsettled, especially the little descending runs that he'll do. It gives it this really unsettled quality. And I don't know, a really pensive sort of quality about it as well. I mean, everything just comes in slowly. It builds to sort of an emotional climax, even though the dynamics aren't huge, and then it slowly just slips out in this way that feels almost eerie. I don't know. I love sad songs and waltzes.
I do too. Yeah, I think the lyrics are just so smart and well thought out and clever, and in the way that McCrae sings them. I love this song. Just like I said with the other two covers, I didn't know for a long time this was a Willie Nelson song. I just
Me
thought
neither.
this was Cake because they make it their own. A perfect song to end the album, not because it's a second thought or like to put you to sleep or wrap it up. Just this is a fitting song to like be the end.
So that's it. That's it for Fashion Nugget. And after this, Brown and Damiani, the bassist. I what I have read is that the bassist decides that he's going to leave, and Greg Brown is kind of like, I'm going with you, and they go do Death Ray. There's an interview with John McCrae and the trumpet player, Vince, and Zan McCurdy, their guitar player after Greg Brown, all on 120 minutes. And it's funny, the reporter kind of just straight up asks about Greg Brown and forming this other band. And it's hard to tell if there's, I don't know. It's just like he's kind of deadpan anyway. It's kind of tough to read what the dynamics are. I mean, I would love to know more about what happened there. It's not highly publicized. Greg Brown eventually comes back and like plays on a song from the last album, their last album, but it was so special. That group, all of these songs that we're talking about, and the critical component that the guitar is and the critical component that the bass is. These things are just, I don't know. This is a special time with a special group of musicians, and it yields this thing that I can't stop listening to. Of course, they go on to release Prolonging the Magic in 1998, another really good album. I remember that coming out and being so excited because of Fashion Nugget, Comfort Eagle in 2001, Pressure Chief in 2004, and Showroom of Compassion in 2011. When we're talking about Fashion Nugget, we're talking about an album that I've listened to more than most other albums on the planet. So to say that I haven't listened to these other albums as much as Fashion Nugget, well, I could say that about it. Basically any album. That's how much I love how much I love Fashion Nugget. But anyway, I think that you can safely say the quality is, Cake never does anything crazy. They never go off the rails. They continue to do good work consistently up until 2011. Of course, the like cadence and the release dates aren't as frequent, but I don't think that like Cake ever goes through a period where they just lose it. I think they, stayed pretty consistent. And I think their whole swaths of listeners of Cake's music who know Never There or short skirt, long jacket. Wow. And that's like how they know them. And then these other ones were ones that they heard later. So I don't know. I feel like there's a whole lot of good material that comes after it. They're all produced by Cake. They continue to produce their own work up until the end, from what I understand. And they do all the album art for all of them. They direct their own videos. I don't think they're anything that they don't have their hands on. And, they've obviously had back and forth with major labels that John McCrae has talked about or alluded to at least. But for the most part, I mean, this is a band that has complete control over what they're doing. So you can expect that quality is going to remain high over time. I think the band's music lives on in movies and TV shows. I hear it all the time, just pop up. I mentioned the Sopranos episode, but I Will Survive is in, I had to look this up. I didn't know this off the top of my head, but it's in a movie called A Long Way Down and Blacklist. And then I do remember, I'm just like, there's a song in Shallow Hal. There's one of Me, Myself, and Irene. Like forgetting Sarah Marshall. They're a bunch. They're a band that just creates a cool sounding song that can fit into a movie really well or a TV show. Their sound has kind of become this thing that you pops up every now and then whenever you're consuming pop culture. So I think they successfully managed to subvert their way into the soundtrack of pop culture. I think The Distance and I Will Survive and Never There and probably Short Skirt, Long Jacket, probably songs that a lot of people know, and they don't even know Cake. They just know that song. So before we move on to some rapid fire stuff here, any other thoughts? Any other thing you want to say about Fashion Nugget or Cake?
I've listened to this album as much as any other album that exists just because I was such a huge fan and continue to be. Like it's one of those albums that just has never left your playlist. You just can't get away from it because there's so many things that remind you of it. So you're constantly being reminded of, and you're like, I got to give that another listen. Just a great music achievement.
People that are interested, there are some interviews with John McCrae out there. I mentioned the one of Professor Rock where they talk about The Distance, some good live performances. They do The Distance on Conan. That's pretty cool to watch. That's with the original lineup or the Fashion Nugget lineup, I should say. And then some later performances of Fashion Nugget songs. Like I saw a performance of Frank Sinatra on Letterman, but it was clearly like a later version of the band. So yeah, some material out there. It's not like a wealth of information on Cake. There should be. You can find it if you look for it. Okay, here we go, man. You ready for some rapid fires?
Yes.
Okay. Who are Cake's contemporaries?
You've mentioned one that I would think of immediately, and that would be Beck. The one that I think maybe is the biggest one for me is Spoon. And the reason why I say Spoon is because Cake and Spoon have the same quality of I can go in a restaurant and there could be a Spoon song playing that I've never heard before, and in 3 seconds I'm going to know it's Spoon. And the
Mm.
same way with Cake. When I think about contemporaries, I think about people that had some longevity and also, have great songwriting and maybe some commercial success. So, thought of Wilco. What about you? Who are Beck's contemporaries for you?
Ben Folds 5.
That's good.
I think just the cleverness of the lyrics, the clarity of the music and the instrumentation. I mentioned Swing Revival earlier. Listeners are going to know that Scroll Nut Zippers, in particular, one album that is called Perennial Favorites, I consider an achievement. And I don't lump Scroll Nut Zippers in with other bands from the swing band revival, but I think that era of Scroll Nut Zippers, I can hear just well-crafted songs that feel like they're from an American songbook.
Yes.
Good instrumentation, people that are good at what they do, moving fluently through different genres. And I mean, even within, Perennial Favorites, they're moving within genres. And I think that's one I'd put on there. Odelay era Beck, I think is a clear corollary to what Cake's doing. Maybe the Eels. I can't even really
Oh,
define
yeah.
why, but there's a gentleness that the Eels can accomplish,
Yes.
that I think has that vulnerability that Cake has. So I put them on the list. And then the last one is Ween, but I think that's just because they experiment with a lot of different genres, and those genres go through the Ween machine, and it always sounds like Ween. In that regard, I think they remind me some of Cake, but I don't really know if it automatically translates to music. I don't know if like Ween fans would be big Cake fans or vice versa.
Right.
But just for that reason alone. Okay, favorite lyric on the album.
I love the chorus to Daria. It's funny that you
Yeah.
said something earlier about, it's fun to imagine him thinking, how many things can I think of that rhyme that you can smooth out,
Right.
you know? And so I just love that. And I feel like that was the first song that really caught my attention. It gave me this like fun feeling, like
Yep.
whimsical, like, hey, there's no rules. I can do whatever I want. And what about for you? What's your favorite lyric?
I have to go with the opening line, man. The Frank Sinatra. I
Yeah.
already read it, but I won't read it again. But like that the imagery, the world, it's just like we're stepping into this world. It's somewhat like mystical and mysterious and sort of ominous in a way, but it's also like kind of fun. And I don't know how he accomplishes all that, but that's got to be my favorite lyric. Is this album the band's peak?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
I agree.
Because of kind of what you said, it was they had this groove. It was just a special place and time that maybe only these 4 or 5 people could create, and it had to be these people at this time. So I think that has to be the peak.
Would you play this album for your kids?
Yes, I would, and I have. So so stick shifts and safety belts is a
It's your wife's
common
favorite.
that's a common song that gets played in our car. So here's how it usually works out for me. We're listening to music and something reminds me of cake, and then I'm like, we got to hear this cake song now. And it's usually like Mexico or Never There. And then once I've heard cake, then it's like, okay, well, now that we've opened this book, we've got to hit all the favorites before we switch to a different book, you know? So then
Right.
I know Amanda's going to want to hear stick shifts and safety belts. But yeah, I don't think I've played Nugget for them yet. And, if I've played I Will Survive, I just get ready for the volume button. And when the bad word comes, I just turn the volume all the way down and then back up.
This is definitely a song, an album that I play for my daughter, but she's one, and I'm just like making dinner and like just playing what I want to hear. She's not really paying attention to the music, so I don't know if it counts. What's the ideal setting or activity for listening to this album? Mine is I don't know why, happy hour on a Thursday or a sunny afternoon drive. That
I I was
two
gonna
that come
say
to mind.
driving, which
Yeah,
I feel like that's kinda, like, lame because you could say that about any album, but
it's
there's
true.
something about driving while hearing The Distance. It's like,
Yeah,
I have to put it on cruise control because
yeah,
I will get in trouble driving while listening to that song. But yeah, I think driving, what you said earlier about hanging out with people, putting it on at a party.
yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like it's a very social album because
It is
it's one of those albums you could put on where nobody's going to be like, "Oh, this,"
right,
you
right.
know, it can make a lot of people happy.
And the driving thing is like there's so much driving imagery in this album too. You know, the distance, race car yayas, stick shifts and safety belts. Like it's about cars in so many ways and driving. So I feel like it makes a lot of sense. Okay, which song on the album would you use to introduce someone to the band's music?
I am probably going to give them Open Book or Frank
Okay.
Sinatra, you know,
Yeah.
because they're just cool.
Yeah, man.
How
That's
about for
me.
you?
That's me too with Frank Sinatra. That's my pick. I love how I'm frozen now. I can see it. So I'm this super cool face is just gonna be what I have from here on out because we're
Hey,
about to wrap this up.
it could be a lot worse.
I mean, what is that? I look so cocky.
Yeah.
Okay, if Fashion Nugget was a movie, what movie would Fashion Nugget be?
Oh my gosh. That's such a fun question. Shawshank Redemption.
Okay, Shawshank. All right,
Yeah. Do you want to
I
know
like
why?
it. Yeah, tell me why.
Because I think first of all, it's a classic that's like cinematic achievement, but I think it's also one of those you can put on Shawshank Redemption and everybody loves that movie.
Mine's Raising Arizona.
Oh man, that's cool. I like that one.
It's quirky, it's fun, it's slightly menacing, and it's smart. So
I
Raising
love
Arizona
it.
is mine. It took me a while to think of that one too. I had to go through. I was like, I think it's a Coen Brothers movie, but I don't know which one.
Yes, and when you said that, I was
Yes.
thinking Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Okay. What band would you like to hear cover Fashion Nugget?
Oh gosh. Tell me yours.
I feel like there's a better answer out there. The best, I kind of thought it would be interesting to hear Sturgill Simpson cover this album just because he could clearly handle the country parts, do really well by that. But then he is okay experimenting with different genres. His like psychedelic rock record is my favorite record of his. So he's not afraid to go into other genres. And I think, I don't know. That was the best one I came up with. But I have to say it. This would make sense at a Fish Halloween show where they cover an entire album.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like well known enough for that. I don't think it would be on the roster, but they'd probably do something fun with this. I don't know why I need to feel the need to apologize whenever I bring up Fish, but yeah, I think they could do something. Who are you thinking?
Well, I was trying to think of somebody. How about I'll do easy and just say Beck.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
Beck covering Fashion Nugget, and then we can get Cake to cover Olay, and all will be right
Oh
in the
my
world.
gosh, that's a great
Yeah, how
idea.
about that? So there you have it, everybody. Fashion Nugget by Cake, an album that has aged very well. Still sounds like a group doing their own thing without concern for the trends of the day. Dude, this has been a blast. One of my all-time favorites. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for letting me talk about Fashion Nugget with you. This has been a lot of fun.